Hello, you're watching Eye on Africa. I'm James Creedon. These are our headlines from across the continent this evening. Burundi's constitutional court has ruled that the president-elect should take power immediately. This after the sudden death of the former leader, Pierre Nkurunziza. We'll bring you more on the attempts to quickly fill that power vacuum at the top of the show. The UN has weighed in after a Cameroonian journalist, Samuel Wazizi, died in custody. They say his death had no legal basis. And now NGO Reporters Without Borders is upping pressure on Cameroon's government to accept that UN opinion. More on that and the plight of other journalists in Cameroon later in the show. And we'll get reactions from Kinshasa over whether or not a statue of Belgium's Colonial era King Leopold II should be removed. This after similar questions have been asked in Belgium. Thanks for watching. Now, we'll start this bulletin in Burundi, where it's been a roller coaster week after the sudden death of President Pierre Nkurunziza. He was just 55 years of age, but had been in power for 15 years. A divisive figure in recent times, Nkurunziza oversaw widespread brutality and the repression of his opponents. He had been due to step down in August in order for his hand-picked successor to take over. Evariste Ndayishimiye recently won the presidential election. Now, Burundi's constitution provides for the Speaker of Parliament to take over in the case of the death of a president, but the Constitutional Court says that as President-elect, Ndayishimiye should be sworn in immediately. Let's take a listen to the court's president.
The court rules that the president of Burundi's office is vacant, that interim is unnecessary, and that the country must proceed as soon as possible with the swearing-in of the President-elect, Evariste Ndayishimiye.
Now, there had been fears that Burundi's political tensions could spill over in the current context. So what do Burundians make of the decision to quickly draft in the President-elect? Our journalists took to the streets to find out.
Iyo ngingo twayakiriye neza, twe twamaze kugira ubwoba bw'ukuntu igihugu kigiye gutwarwa mw'iyi minsi, kuko gushikisa haraheze 3 jours atamu president wundi turahabwa yo kwimikwa. Iyo ngingo rero twayakiriye neza muri make.
Nabyakiriye neza cyane. Nabyakiriye neza kubera iki? Nabyakiriye neza kubera turavye president twaramaze kumwitorera.
Now, in Cameroon, the death of journalist Samuel Wazizi while in custody has caused an uproar and led to international condemnation. He disappeared in August 2019 while covering a separatist uprising in 2 English-speaking regions of mostly Francophone Cameroon. Press organisations have denounced the government's secrecy in communicating the circumstances of his death. Many suspect he was tortured. President Paul Biya says an investigation will take place. But Wazizi's death has put the spotlight on other journalists also imprisoned, with many of them without a trial. This report from our team in Yaoundé.
On his TV show, prior to his disappearance in August 2019, Wazizi talked about the bloody crisis in the 2 English-speaking regions of Cameroon. Samuel Wazizi's disappearance made headline news for several days before the army only officially announced his death 10 months after his arrest. Enough to anger his family and colleagues like Javis, who were without news of the journalist for almost a year.
It was shocking to me that we have a judicial system that is supposed to be independent, could not verify. We have the court in Buya. They could not tell us if Wazizi was dead.
According to the army, the journalist died in detention of sepsis and not of torture. In their statement, the soldiers claimed to have placed his body in the morgue 10 months ago and were sorry that the family had not come to recover it.
Based on the professionalism that I know the person, I'm sure he may not have.
According to press freedom activists, many Cameroonian journalists are behind bars. Like Paul Biya, most are detained for months without trial. In this modest 1-bedroom flat in Yaoundé, the whistleblower's 3-year-old daughter is being raised by her mother since his arrest. The journalist is known for his write-ups against the Biya regime. Accused of defamation, he has been in jail for 10 months. According to his partner, who would rather remain anonymous, Chuta's arrest is a pretext to silence him.
I've been attacked once, at my doorstep. When I follow the news, when I hear the stories of journalists or others who are killed, it scares me. It hurts me.
At the other end of town, we are at another journalist's home who's been in prison for almost 4 years as his trial drags on. Amadou Vamuke is a former general manager of the National Radio and Television. He is accused of embezzling state funds.
Hello, Mama?
His son visits him in prison. This has become a routine for the family. They still do not understand the charges against their father, whose health has deteriorated over the years.
Ils sont très inquiets par rapport au Covid qui sévit en prison. Il y a déjà eu des morts et il est entouré de gens qui ont déjà attrapé ça près de lui. Je vous rappelle qu'il est dans une cellule avec 10 personnes. Donc on ne peut pas respecter la distanciation de 1 mètre.
Since launching an international campaign, Reporters Without Borders has been unable to get Amadou Vamoke out of this detention center in Yaoundé. All our attempts to get a reaction from Cameroonian authorities proved futile.
Now, next to the ongoing fight against jihadi militants in the Sahel region, France has launched a coalition of West African and European allies to up the ante. Paris hosted a virtual meeting of 45 defence and foreign ministers on Friday. The aim is to provide more European special forces for regional armies. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are also to provide financial aid. France has long argued for more support from other European countries and for more cooperation between states in the Sahel region. The World Health Organization says the coronavirus pandemic is set to worsen in Africa, with a big acceleration in the number of cases in the past 2.5 weeks. Just 10 countries are driving those high numbers, accounting for 75% of the total number of cases. Now, this does mean that most countries on the continent remain far less affected than elsewhere. Caris Garland has more.
With cases doubling in less than 2 weeks, health experts warn the spread of COVID-19 is gathering speed in Africa as countries start to lift lockdown measures.
We know that it took 98 days to reach the first 100,000 cases and only 19 days to move to 200,000 cases. So even though these cases in Africa account for less than 3% of the global total, it's clear that the pandemic is accelerating.
The continent now has more than 216,000 confirmed cases and almost 6,000 deaths. South Africa is the hardest hit country, accounting for more than 58,000 infections, closely followed by Egypt and then Nigeria. The World Health Organization raised concerns about the virus's potentially devastating effects in Africa early on, citing a lack of infrastructure, underdeveloped health systems, and problems enforcing social distancing measures. However, the continent hasn't seen the death rates experienced in Europe, the US or Latin America, nor has there been significant infections in refugee camps. The WHO said that while African countries' quick moves to impose lockdown measures have helped the situation, vigilance was still needed. It pointed to a lack of supplies, particularly test kits, as one of the biggest challenges. But 8 million diagnostic tools and 200 million personal protective equipment items will soon be shipped to African countries.
To Kinshasa next, where Belgium's Colonial King Leopold II may not be peering down at passers-by for much longer. Activists want a statue of him removed. This echoes similar calls and petitions regarding statues in Belgium. Present-day DR Congo was King Leopold II's personal possession. Some 10 million people perished under his watch, although he never set foot in the country. So should a statue honouring his memory be kept or removed? Let's take a listen to some reactions.
Far removed from the protests and controversy simmering in his native Belgium, the statue of King Leopold II still sits solemnly in Kinshasa's presidential garden. But as the DRC readies to celebrate its 60 years of independence, it's facing growing calls for the monument to be removed, as critics say it glorifies the country's colonial past.
C'est un monsieur qui a sali a fait souffrir Congolais nos ancêtres esclavagisme à Katara Maboko.
In 1885, Leopold II bought the Congo using his personal fortune. Considering the entire country as his private property, he then enslaved local populations to work in the ivory and rubber industries. Those who refused or didn't work hard enough had their hands cut off. An estimated 10 million people were massacred during Leopold's 30-year rule, 30 years during which the King of Belgians never set foot in the Congo. Yet over a century after the fact, there are those who want his statue to remain and serve as a reminder of the horrors of the past.
L'histoire, que ça soit mauvaise ou bonne, ça reste une histoire. Nous apprenons à nos enfants l'histoire du Congo. L'histoire précoloniale, colonial et post-colonial.
Leopold II's statue had already been removed in 1967 by Congolese dictator Mobutu Sese Seko, but it was restored and rehabilitated in 2010 under the leadership of Joseph Kabila.
Now, he spent half a century roaming the Sahara Desert, and now the French archaeologist Thierry Tillet is embarking on another expedition. A team of journalists from Agence France Presse travelled with Tillet and his cortege in central Mauritania to trace ancient trade routes. Let's take a look.
This is not the typical pensioner's idea of fun. But 68-year-old retired archaeology professor Thierry Tillet is in his element. He has spent much of the last 47 years travelling across the Sahara. This time, the French archaeologist is in Mauritania, northwest Africa, tracing the route of old desert trade caravans. The archaeologist is well accustomed to these expeditions on camelback. He has done more than 70 of them.
I examine the hump. If it has a good shape, nice and round, it means there is a lot of fat, and I check their knees to see they are good and sturdy.
Ahead lies a harsh journey of 300 kilometers over 13 days.
The fact that we move slowly on the ground and the pace of the camels allows me to observe things on the ground and spot things that I wouldn't if I was in a car.
He follows in the footsteps of his mentor, Théodore Monod, a giant in French exploration of the Sahara. When Monod died in 2000, he passed a lifelong task on to Tillet, locating an 11th century caravan storage camp. It was rediscovered in 1956, but never found again.
When I arrive at an unknown site, the first thing I do is mark my position on the GPS. I get the lie of the land. I look around. Very often you find prehistoric artifacts thrown to the ground. In the Sahara, since everything lies in the open, you could easily step on it. So I look to see if there are any tools to try to figure out what they were.
Tillet is currently planning a 1,000-kilometer expedition for 2021, when he hopes to spend a whole month in the desert.
Okay, that's all for this edition of Eye on Africa. Thank you for watching and good night.